guys, how's it going? I'm Hannah at the Church Musician's Assistant, and I'd love to know who all is here today so far. So if you could introduce yourself in the comment box, that would be awesome. Hold on just a sec. All right, I'm just going to give us a minute for any more people to show up. All right, let's get started. So, today I want to talk about the first steps that we should take when arranging or playing hymns for congregational singing. Now you should be able to see my screen right now. All right, so in this first session, I want to talk about context. We need to consider context in a multitude of ways before we even touch the keyboard or whatever instrument we are using to play or arrange hymns. What we will cover today, so we're going to talk about 6 different contexts that affect hymn arranging for congregations. The first section is genre, so there's a lot of different hymn genres, and that section will take up the most time by far, but it should be fun, and we'll do a little singing and listening also. And then you've also got to consider text, liturgy, like how the hymn functions within the worship service, the space that the hymn is being sung or played in, the instrumentation available, and of course the familiarity of the tune. So that is what we're going to cover today. Every hymn has a past, even if it has just been written, but every hymn has a history and a deep spiritual connection to a certain group of people, right? And before we change anything about a hymn or decide to lead that hymn congregationally, I believe we should try to understand the hymn's context and do it justice. First of all, we need to ask, how can we honor the hymn's special qualities, right? Every hymn has particular characteristics that make it special, and how can we honor that and honor the people who composed it and the people whose heart song that hymn is? Then, how can we customize the hymn for our own particular worship situation? Because all of us are in different churches, different denominations with different, genders and age groups and all sorts of things, different locations. So obviously we have to customize every hymn for the situation that we are in. And then after we've done all of that, after we've considered those things, then we can ask, how can we contribute our own individual creativity to the hymn? And that's where, compositional techniques come in. How can we make this really our own? In order to honor a hymn's characteristics, we should start by identifying its genre, and that's what we're going to talk about first. Every hymn genre has an important history, and common performance practices often grow out of that history, right? If we familiarize ourselves with those performance practices, we will be able to lead those hymns more respectfully and in a more powerful way. Of course, we can always add our own unique flair. There's that aspect too, but first we have to look at, what are the characteristics of this hymn and how would it be performed by the people who love it and who created it. So we are going to start with hymn genres, and some of these are going to be really familiar to you, and others might be quite unfamiliar, and it'll just depend on maybe what denomination you come from and what your religious background is. But I think this section will be fun for everybody. So first I'm going to show you the musical example, either sheet music or a recording. And I'd like you to comment in the chat box which genre you think it fits into. What do you think the genre is? Some of them are going to be obvious. And then what do you think makes that genre unique? What are its particular characteristics? All right, so here's the first one. This is Veni Emmanuel. Let's all sing this together. Let's sing the first verse just for fun, all right? One, and oh come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel, that mourns in lonely exile here, until the Son of God appear. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to you, O Israel. All the Catholics out there, you know what this is. Latin chant, of course. So let's talk a little bit about Latin chant. Now, Latin chant, of course, existed at least by the 4th century, probably before, but we have some fragments of music from the 4th century. And there were all kinds of types of chant in all the regions of Europe. And then Charlemagne came along, and at about 800 AD, he wanted to unify his Holy Roman Empire, and so he declared that the Roman chant would be codified as the official chant of the church. And so, for better or worse, all of the regional chants were kind of stamped out at that time. And sadly, we don't have a lot of evidence of what those were like Gaelic chant and so forth. But Roman chant became the music of the church. And so from 800 AD forward, we have lots and lots of those kinds of chants. They were often sung by trained priests, and the congregants, the lay people, listened. They conveyed elements of the Catholic Mass and also Scripture. Of course, chant was found in massive cathedrals with huge amounts of reverberation. So what does that have to do with performance? What can we glean from that history? Well, probably unison singing is preferable, but also perfect intervals or drones were commonly used to accompany. These were called organum or organum, however you want to emphasize that. But, let's say you have Veni Emmanuel, you could use a drone. Or a second singer could sing the same thing, but of perfect fourth below. Or a fifth even. Now, after the 13th century, the church gradually infiltrated polyphony. Multiple lines moving at the same time. And the text at that point became muddied sometimes. So not everybody was singing the same text at the same time. Different singers would be singing it different times because of the polyphonic lines. So we have chant in that fashion as well. So we probably would have no instruments accompanying, but if you have instruments accompanying, it would be bare. Okay, the phrases are speech-like and flowing, legato, and smooth. Now, if when you put your creative touch on a chant, if you want to arrange it somehow for the congregation, of course, you don't have to necessarily do these things, but this is where we need to start and what we need to consider. This is the history and how it has been done. Okay, next genre. So, vom Himmel hoch. Comment, what genre is this? What do you think? I'm going to give you the last line here, and then let's sing the first verse. Just for 1 second, I'm going to go check the comments because I haven't been able to see them. Oh, wow, lots of comments. Yay. All right. Hi, Lovelace. Hi, Caleb. Michaela. John. Chris. Benjamin. Gwenfor, am I saying that right? From Wales. Wow. Hi, Martha. Yes, German chorale. You got it, Michaela. Okay, I'm going to keep going then. Awesome. 1 second. Okay, so German chorale. Some history behind this. All right. In the 1520s, 1524 to 34, somewhere in there, Luther put out a book of chorales, and these were meant for the laity to sing. Okay, so he was trying to put song in the mouths of the people rather than just the priests, and he wanted the people to sing in the vernacular rather than the Latin. So vernacular for them would be German. The tunes were actually often derived from chant. And a common misconception, people think that Luther hated the Catholic music. Not true at all. Some of his favorite music was Catholic. I think he loved Palestrina. Anyway, he pulled from Latin chants a lot and even secular melodies. Ooh, risque. Some new tunes were composed for new vernacular texts. These were often in 4 parts, okay, full chordal textures so that choirs could sing together. They were sung fairly slowly because, again, these were in big churches with a lot of reverb, and people sang robustly, lustily even. There was usually no accompaniment, but maybe organ accompaniment. And at the ends of phrases, just like I played before, they're usually fermatas, and they would hold it for as long as necessary before moving on. Okay, performance-wise, probably 4 parts. Play it slow enough, ponderous enough for the congregation to really be able to absorb those dense theological texts that Luther and the counterparts wrote to convey theology to the masses. And probably uncomplicated organ accompaniment or a cappella singing. Next example. Okay, let's sing the first verse of this also and comment what genre this is. The name of the tune kind of gives it away. one of my favorite hymns ever. I love it. Genevan Psalter. Yeah, that one was obvious. So, a little bit of history on this one. You know, Jean Calvin kind of kicked off the Genevan Psalter. These were a collection of tunes for each psalm, and then there were some other. He didn't want a ton of singing in worship, but he did think that it could enhance Scripture, and that Scripture mandated, at least to some extent, singing, particularly of the Psalms. These were sung predominantly a cappella by the congregations, or maybe with a small ensemble of chamber musicians. The tunes were likely based on French secular tunes, actually. Kind of the same thing that Luther did, pulling from secular music. These were kind of like Latin chant in the fact that they accompanied unmetered texts, and so the musical phrases were speech-like. There are other examples, other than the one we just sang, that I would say are more like that. They feel more unmetered. So, in that way, they're chant-like. Performance-wise, you know, these are supposed to have a dance-like lilt to them, like I just played it. You should be able to feel that you can move with it. They might be accompanied by light organ or a small instrumental ensemble. And then, especially with some of the tunes that feel more unmetered, you can have more freedom with the tempos and the tail ends of phrases. Ooh, this is a wonderful hymn. This is for all the Anglicans out there, or Episcopalians. Let's sing the first phrase of this. I'll give you the last line. Victorian hymns, yes. English hymnody. English hymnody in the 1800s was being written at the end of what's called the Age of Decadence, right? Where there was this cultural fascination with nature, with science, with grandeur, fashion, you know. And so the hymnody really reflects that. You can tell with the harmonies, there's more chromaticism. It's the melodies really soar. They pull at the heartstrings, kind of lush and heavy. So these would have been sung in Anglican cathedrals with big organs, and often trained boys' choirs would have sung along with the congregation. Performance-wise, you know, there's a reason why organists love these hymns, because it's the opportunity to literally pull out the stops and do all of your fancy creative hymn playing stuff like descants, sectional solos, free harmonizations, etc. Go all out with the majestic organ accompaniments, the full choir, and congregation in parts. These are probably the most fun hymns for the church musician. Okay, hopefully my face is not covering up the music here. What genre is this? Please comment and let us sing. I love this one. What fun. All right, revival hymns. Yes. Real quick, I'm going to check the comments before we go on. Who else is here? Yeah. John says, my favorite English hymns. Definitely. All right. Promises is a great belter tune. Agreed. All right, let's go on. So, revival hymns. A little bit of history. They came out of the Great Awakenings from the 1720s through the 1820s. During this time, preachers were traveling across America trying to convert non-believers. There was a greater sense of personal piety, connection to Jesus on an individual level, greater sense of devotion. The worship style was more charismatic, and I'm not going to get into definitions of charismatic because that's kind of complicated, but you kind of know what I mean when I say charismatic, right? The songs, therefore, because the preachers were trying to Christianize people, they had to have songs that were memorable and catchy and simple, right? So these revival hymns are often really energetic. They have rhythmic dotted rhythms, simple harmonies, strong bass lines, and so they could be played in rural churches. They were often piano-based with accompaniment. On the performance side, that means there's a heavy emphasis on the melody and the bass line. And then those harmony parts in the middle, like the alto and the tenor, they kind of interject, right? Standing on. And that's what's somewhat so fun about singing these is the call and response between the parts. Piano accompaniment is probably preferable, or a cappella. Really accentuate the detached rhythms and sing robustly. Okay, next example. I want to be a Christian. What genre is this? This one should be easy. Oh, I forgot to give an introduction. Anyway, let's sing it. 1, 2. So, this is a spiritual, of course. Spirituals came out of the 18th and 19th centuries when slavery was prevalent, especially in the South. These were sung a cappella as a solo or as a communal activity, and that's why there's usually call and response built into these songs. The melodies are really simple, again, so that they were very memorable, easy to pass on orally. So the melodies have pentatonic scales and simple harmonies. Performance-wise, they're often still sung a cappella. In that style, they're usually layered harmonies above the melody and below, which is something a little different from what a lot of Protestant and Catholic churches do, right? We always put harmony below the melody, but in the spiritual and gospel vein, harmonies are stacked on top a lot of times. Oh, well, sensitive replication of dialect. Yeah, if you want to try to sing the dialect, I've heard from African Americans say that they are open to non-African Americans doing that, but that you should do research, talk to someone who knows about it and do it sensitively, right? Often there's a leader who not only leads the hymn, but improvises over the choral parts as well. Okay, here's the next example. Again, it's probably going to be really obvious what genre this is.
Come on!
I love that one. Does anybody know that one? Of course, this is a gospel song. We've come this far by faith. Gospel really came in the 20th century. It was influenced by the revivals and by spirituals, by blues, and later, of course, jazz. There is always a spirit of improvisation that is welcome in gospel. Heavy beats and syncopation, making one feel, like they want to get up and dance and move. Simple harmonic structures, but often the keyboardists, musicians, and the singers add in color tones, right? Extended tertian tones. And they throw in these crawling bass lines, chromatically moving up and down the keyboard or the bass. Gospel's played on the piano or the Hammond organ. The texts are simple like the harmonies, but the texts are really powerful and they're meant to be sung cyclically so that the mood of it really overwhelms you. Yeah, choruses and repetition, already said that. High intensity build-ups, right, because of that repetition. Thickly layered choral harmonies, again, above and below the tune. Interjecting soloists who improvise, band instrumentation, and a relaxed swing feel in many gospel songs. So, performance-wise, you would want to try to have full choir singing those thick harmonies. That's really essential. If you can, have an improvising leader. Have some of those characteristic gospel instruments, band instruments, the piano, the Hammond, probably not the pipe organ, okay? Have a rhythm section if possible. Now, CCM and CWM. Some people here may not be too excited for this section. And you might be thinking, why do we need to cover this if we're talking about arranging hymns? A lot of people don't think CCM and CWM qualify as hymns. I define hymns generally as songs of praise. Songs of praise. And so, of course, CCM and CWM fall into that category, and we as church musicians these days have to be really versatile. Really versatile. You never know what you're going to encounter, right? You may be asked by your church to establish a contemporary worship service, or to bring in a contemporary worship song into the traditional service. You don't know, but it's good to be versatile and be able to say, yes, I can do that. So CCM and CWM are a little bit different. Contemporary Christian music is really more specific to the solo and recording industry, whereas Christian worship music targets I don't like the word target, shouldn't use that word, but it is meant to be sung by the worshiping body, by the congregation. So listen to this first example and tell me whether it's CWM or CCM. Oops. Sorry about that. I was trying to fast forward. Okay, that's the first example. And then here's another example. I'm just going to say automatically you notice that in the first example, the videography was showing the congregation singing, right? And this videography is focusing highly on this woman, Lauren. So that kind of gives it away. I dare not let them. Let's go. Break my strength, Jesus. You overcome it. You gave your life to give me. Yeah, so the first one is CWM. You didn't know, and the second one is CCM. In the second one you see nobody in the crowd. I'm going to call it a crowd, not a congregation, because they're not singing, and it's more of an experience where you absorb the music in a prayerful way, rather than the first example where you participate in the musical experience. Some history of these genres. Contemporary Christian music came out of the 60s when certain artists and publishing houses such as Vineyard and Maranatha Music were bringing folk music into the church. And through the 70s, 80s, into the 90s, this evolved into groups like U2, which I didn't even know was a religious group until a couple of years ago, because they've done so much non-religious music. But anyway, this evolved into U2 and Amy Grant and many, many others who found commercial success. Of course, there was a backlash from churches against this commercialism, and there still is. There's probably always going to be. And so, in response to that, people like Chris Tomlin, groups like Hillsong, created songs for the congregations to sing, and that's CWM. These have repeatable choruses, kind of like with gospel, and the choruses are interrupted by verses, which are usually led by the soloists. not sung by congregations. So chorus is sung by congregations, verse is sung by soloists. The textures and the volumes of these songs are meant to overwhelm the senses. And the songs, if you listen to enough of them, you'll notice a pattern, right? There's always this beginning section that's kind of calm, quiet. There's like synth pads in the background, and then it builds the excitement to this climax after singing that chorus over and over. And then it'll come back down to that meditative state again. So it's trying to create this powerful, transcendent experience for the congregation. Performance-wise, what works really well is, of course, guitars, pianos, synth keyboards, drums. But, you can arrange these things to sound more, don't like the word traditional, but you can make them sound more like a choral piece, and that can actually be cool. Or make them into acoustic songs, at least, with acoustic guitar and such. Use soloists to guide the song and to sing the verses, and have those long chorus build-ups to a climax. You can't just sing the chorus once and be done. It defeats the purpose of the genre. So you gotta let those choruses build up. Alright, gonna pause for just a second and check the comments. Oh, John, it's really not necessary. What do you mean? Oh. Yeah, I missed the context on that too. Dialects. Yes, I'm hesitant about that too. Well, I don't know. I'm not an authority on dialect, so others chime in on that for me. Okay, now global song is something that has come into our sphere in the last 60, 70 years, right, since Vatican II. And now, fortunately, we have all kinds of global songs in our hymnals, and more are coming along the way. So, as a versatile church musician, you will probably be asked to play and maybe arrange global songs for your churches, for your choirs, for your instrumentalists, whatever. Now, for me, the definition, and this is kind of pulled from Dr. Hahn's book, what's it called? New Songs of Celebration Render. This is sort of taken from his book, where he says, global song is any song that is not native to the Western locale, as in, our location, or the Western, maybe you're living in a different place, and if you're living in a different culture, then global song includes different songs than it does for me, right? So it just depends on your perspective what is global. But it's anything that's not your own music. Here's one that you are probably going to recognize. It's very popular. What genre of global music is this? Wish this thing right here was not in the way so I could move around. So notice characteristics of this style. What makes it unique? Of course, this is African. It's a South African song called Siyahamba. Its characteristics: polyrhythmic percussion, lots of percussion. Now, I'm generalizing because the African continent is obviously huge, and there's many different kinds of song that are sung throughout those nations. But overall, there's lots of percussion, polyrhythms, meaning different rhythms layered on top of each other. They are sung communally, right? It's not really a solo genre. It's meant to be done with others, particularly at religious meetings or political events. It usually has a religious or political overtone. The songs are transmitted orally, or at least they have been for hundreds, if not thousands of years, until the advent of written music. There's an improvisational style, call and response style, as in African American music. There's dancing with music. You can hardly separate dancing from music, in fact. They're one with each other. Tonal inflections of the languages in Africa often affect the drumming pitches used and even the musical and rhythmical patterns. These songs are meant to be sung cyclically as well, over and over again, with different variations, particularly in the rhythms occurring underneath. Okay, next example. I took out the text because the text is copyrighted in English, and I don't want to get a copyright claim on this video, although I might anyway because YouTube is really finicky with that. But just kind of hum along the melody with me here. It's called Lord, We Thank You for This Food. Where does this song come from? Asia. Yes, you can tell from that pentatonic melody, probably. Pentatonic meaning a scale of 5 notes. Now in Asia, there's more than just the pentatonic scale, especially in like Southern Asia. They experiment with many other modal scales. These songs tend to be monophonic, as in one line only, or heterophonic, which is kind of cool. You don't see this in a lot of other cultures near us, in the Western culture. Heterophonic meaning the same line is sung by multiple people, but those singers are altering it a little bit individually. So it's a cool stacked effect of the same melody but being altered a little bit. The singing quality is often nasal. You'll notice that if you listen to much Asian music. The singers will embellish the melody with things like slides and grace notes. Again, as in African languages, Asian languages, the certain words, if you use a different inflection, they mean totally different things. And so that, the pitches of the language can affect the singing and the playing styles. There are diverse tuning systems, which are fascinating if you ever want to go research that. It's really, really interesting. Those, of course, affect the instruments, how those are made and played, and the singing. As far as instruments go, traditional Asian instruments are gongs, cymbals, bamboo flutes, string instruments. All right, I think this is the last example in the genre section. And remember, this section was the longest, so the following sections will be much shorter.
Cantemos al Señor, unimos
al Señor is South American. I believe that one is Mexican, to be precise. So the whole continent of Central and South America is what we're talking about here. And again, way overgeneralizing, but here's some characteristics. Number one, the fiesta spirit, which is really important to the culture. The fiesta spirit is basically the idea that celebration has the power to liberate people. So it's the party spirit. These songs use estribillos, which are like short, memorable refrains, like choruses. They call their heart songs corritos. Those are also usually short and very simple and memorable. In this culture, like with African cultures, dance is almost inseparable from music. And in African-inspired songs, there is much complex drumming and polyrhythms. You'll notice instruments such as the guitar, like I said, percussion instruments, and piano. This is the last one. I bet everyone will know. Yes, and eventually a soloist comes in and sings verses on top of that lovely refrain. This is a song from the Taize community. Also, Iona songs are kind of lumped into this genre. Some characteristics of these. They came out of the French and Scottish 20th century outburst of new cyclical songs. They're often for meditative, prayerful, devotional purposes. They use a variety of instruments, and that's kind of the beauty of them is, they're designed for any instrumentalist or singer out there. Just come up and join, and we've got a part for you. It can be a great way to incorporate the congregation, the amateur musicians in the congregation. These are sung either unison or in parts. They often complement liturgical actions. So they're happening during a liturgical action, such as communion. So, all right, we're done with the genre portion. Hope that was sort of fun. Understanding genre helps us honor the rich history and performance practices of each hymn that we want to play or arrange. And this understanding is super essential if we want to write hymn arrangements respectfully. We have discussed how to honor a hymn's special qualities. So now, how can we customize a hymn for our particular worship situation? Well, again, we need to look at some other contextual situations, such as emphasis of the text. When arranging a hymn, what do you want to highlight about the hymn text? What is your pastoral goal? It's really important to decide this before altering the hymn at all, okay? First of all, is there a theological lesson or a passage of scripture that you want to bring to light? Perhaps you just want to create a meditative state for prayer, such as, bless the Lord, my soul. The text is nice, right? But there's not a ton of substance there. So it's more about creating a meditative state. Perhaps you just want to emphasize communal participation and unity. I would say Sia Hamba is an example of that. We are marching in the light of God. Again, that's, it's a nice image of marching in the light of God, but not full of substance, and that's really not the point of the song. It's about participating together, dancing together, playing instruments together, all of that. Maybe you want to highlight poetic imagery, such as in a Victorian hymn where you might have these metaphors about the blood of Christ, or I can only think of hell stuff, but there's so many beautiful metaphors in Victorian hymns that you might want to accentuate. So after looking at the text, you also want to think about the liturgical function of the hymn. Ask, what happens in the worship service right before the hymn? What happens right after the hymn? In the liturgy. When I say liturgy, I just mean like the flow of the service, right? Every denomination, every church has a liturgy, even if you don't call it that. Even if you think, liturgy, that's just like for Episcopalians and Catholics and stuff. Liturgy just means the work of the people. So it's the flow of the service. So consider what's happening before and after the hymn, and how might that change how you approach arranging or playing that hymn. Number 2, what mood is needed at that point in the service? If you play a hymn during communion, or you play that hymn during offertory, it's the same hymn, right? But the mood is a little bit different, and what you want to highlight with your playing is going to be different. Okay, it's just going to depend on the context, but it's something to think about. Number 3, this is practical. Are there any time restraints that might affect your playing, right? Like communion, that's a good example, because people are walking up. Well, in some churches they walk, in some churches they sit, but either way, it takes a certain amount of time. So maybe your introduction needs to be longer because it's taking a while for all of the people to come up and take communion. Or maybe you need to cut out a verse because people are finishing up. You get the point. The next context is physical space. What are your surroundings like? Okay, what are the acoustics like? That's important. Or reverberation too, because let's say you're arranging a hymn, maybe a Latin chant. You're arranging a Latin chant as a choral anthem, and you want a certain section to be staccato or legato. That is going to come off differently in a really dry, small space than in a huge reverberant space. If your choir is singing it in a dry space, you might need to tell them, sing really legato, okay? Whereas in a larger space, you could tell them to sing more detached or something. What is the size of the room? How many people are going to attend? Because people absorb sound. This is important. Are you visible or hidden to the congregation as the leader of this hymn? If your arrangement requires people to be able to see you, like you're playing this cool introduction and it's a little nebulous as to when it ends, well, it'd be helpful if you are visible to the congregation so you can go, and now. But if you're not, if you're up in the balcony or something, then, maybe go with a more obvious introduction. That's just one example of how that might impact your arranging. Next context is instrumentation. What instruments are available to you? Are there any congregants who play instruments? What instruments do you have up on the chancel? What instruments do you desire to have? What is your main accompanimental instrument? Do you play piano, organ, guitar? How will you utilize the choir if it exists, if you have a choir? How are you going to use them in your arrangement? Are there guest or volunteer musicians? And what are their ability levels? Yeah, if you're writing for instrumentalists, you need to know, are they beginners or can they handle advanced stuff? And then familiarity of the tune. This one is big. Who are you arranging for? And how well do they know the hymn tune? This impacts a lot of things, like the length of the introduction. Okay, if they don't know the hymn at all, you're going to have to play the whole hymn in your introduction. Prominence of tune throughout the hymn. Yeah, so if they don't know the tune very well, you may not want to add any descants or reharms. It impacts whether you will, reharmonize or change other integral elements of the hymn. Instrumentation and volume of the accompaniment overall. Again, something cool you can always do is drop out and let the choir sing by themselves. But if the congregation doesn't know the hymn very well, you should probably not do that. Not until the congregation knows it better. And then, of course, creative use of the choir. The choir can sing in unison the whole time. They can sing in parts if there are parts written. They can, you can always write parts to it if it doesn't have parts, right? You can give solos to sections like the tenors and the basses. The choir can sing a cappella. The choir can sing a descant, etc. After considering all of these contextual components, you can progress to the next step of arranging, which is adding your own individual creativity. But that is for another day. Yeah? Now, I want to get your questions and thoughts so far. And if we are to do another session on hymn arranging, what specifically do you need help with? Like, if we get into compositional techniques, let's say, what would you want me to cover? So please enter that in the comments. And while you're thinking of that and typing it in, please subscribe to the channel. That would be really helpful to me, to my business. And go download this free PDF outline that I made of all the stuff that we covered today. If you go to this link, which is www.thechurchmusiciansassistant.com/hymn-context, then you can download the whole outline of what we talked about today. How are y'all doing over there? All right, so let me know what you would want to learn in a follow-up session, because this was like before you even touch an instrument or paper. While you're doing that, I want to tell you about a resource that's available to you. So, right now, people are understandably scared and anxious because of the COVID-19 virus, because of quarantine, because of the economy going down. There's a lot of fear. And as church musicians, as clergy people, I think it's our duty, it's our jobs to quell that a little bit, to help people get through this time. And music has this amazing ability to transform people, to help them transcend their fears, to help them transcend their ego, to help them walk a path more Christ-like. And so we're in a really crucial position. We have a lot of pastoral power, actually, and responsibility. And now is the time, I think, to really be helping people get through this with congregational song. So I want to show you a resource that I've created, which I think is really, really valuable and is even more important right now, as we need to be creative, as we need to be hopeful and positive and sharing the music of God. So I'm going to show you what this is. I created a course called the Creative Hymn Playing for Keyboardists online course. And I want to show you what it looks like when you get inside the course, okay? So when you get the course, this is what it looks like. You have a course preparation section. And then this first section is called Fundamentals of Inspiring Hymn Playing. Steps before touching the keyboard. That's like what we talked about today, okay? And then there's all of these lessons, breathing and phrasing, transitioning from the introduction to the verse. That's really important information for anybody leading hymns. And I want to show you what it looks like when you click a lesson. Okay, you get a video, and the videos are like between 5 and 30 minutes long. Some of them are really quite packed with content, okay? You get the script, where I have succinctly condensed everything from the lesson for you. You have a comment section, and when you comment, I check those and I respond, and that's how you communicate with me and ask questions. And then usually there's going to be a download over here, and again, that's kind of a condensing of the lesson, and you get to keep that, you get to save it. Let's explore the other categories. Creative techniques for leading verses. There's like 10 or 11 lessons in this section. Really helpful. Stuff like creating descants, soloing out melodies, reharmonizing using pedal points. Next category, tips for playing imaginative introductions, okay? Embracing repetition, mixing up textures, harmony. This section is going to be really helpful for most people. A lesson about interludes and how to modulate, how to transpose hymns. And by the way, there's a lot of my own hymn accompaniments, like introductions and reharmonizations. And when I use those as examples, I add the sheet music as a download over there on the right, so you get to keep all of those. Then there's these lessons on piano-specific considerations. If you are a pianist, there's organ-specific considerations, such as hymn registrations. And as soon as I'm out of quarantine, if I can get to an organ, I will create a series of lessons on how to adapt piano scores to the organ. And then a call to action section. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to include a link to check out that course some more if you would like. It is not free, but about the price, I want to say, I've taken college courses on service playing. I have gone to conferences where there's been seminars on creative hymn playing, and I'll say that my course has all of that content and maybe more. I think it's actually maybe more practical and useful, and it costs way less than a college course, than any university course, or any ticket price to a conference. I know tons of people go to these conferences and they're wonderful. I've been to them and I love them. But you can rack up to like $1,000 of costs when you factor in food and travel and lodging and the conference ticket and all that. So when compared to that, it's not much at all. And so it's actually worth quite a bit more, but I'm hesitant to raise the price right now because, me included, we're all concerned about financial well-being in the future. So I'm not going to raise it for a while, but it is there for you. And I hope you'll take advantage of it. I hope you've enjoyed this session today. Now I'm going to go back and see what you guys said. Ad-libbing key changes and interlude music between hymns and parts of liturgy. Okay, yeah, that's okay. How to reharmonize, okay. Yes, I will repost the link to tonight's summary. Let's see here. Okay, that should work. Thanks, Lovelace. God bless you too. Oh, thanks for the comments. I appreciate that. I'm glad you enjoyed this. Worship online. Yeah, more ideas there. Okay. Okay, so I'm seeing stuff about interludes. Maybe improvising during the liturgy, reharmonizations. Is there anything else? Can you tell me, are you looking for how to arrange for like organ, or maybe for instrumentalists in your congregation, or for choir? That would help me to know. I thank you guys for coming and sticking with me the whole time. This was fun for me to put together. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any further suggestions. If that's the case, then I will plan on putting together another YouTube live session, maybe for next week, if that sounds good, and I will take your suggestions into consideration and think about how we can learn together on here on YouTube Live. All right, guys. Thanks for coming, and I'll see you guys again soon, probably next week. Have a great afternoon.